Welcome and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining again today. My name is Daniel Lurel. I'm the Vice President, Westcon Cybersecurity and Next Generation Solution in the EMEA. I'm very happy and excited to bring once again today this incredible channel cybersecurity event to our partner across the EMEA. Yesterday, you were more than 1,100. Thank you for attending. That was a great attendance. So the theme did not change. It's still innovate to differentiate. So first of all, we'll go to the technology innovation. We will help you to discover the highest growth security markets in partnership with our best-in-class security vendors. And today, we will address the zero trust access, secure cloud, and DevOps security markets. Then we will go to the channel innovation. So listen, and I hope influence our channel leadership panels. We'll go to the security innovation after that. And I hope you will get inspired by our keynote speakers. And today will be Hector Monsegur, security advisor and former Black Hat. That should be very, very exciting. And finally, I hope that you will join us tomorrow to celebrate our partnership during the Westcon Security Partner Award ceremony. I would like this session to be as interactive as it was yesterday. So don't forget to use the text chat box to ask your question or to put some comment. We have also a large number of virtual booths where you can live video chat with some expert and when you will discover a lot of content. Join also the virtual treasure hunt. By finding these treasure shields hidden in the booth, you will be able to win a Galaxy S21 or an iPhone 12. During the break, you can test your speed and memory with our game to win some prizes. And today, this is possible thanks to our partner, Pulse Secure. Now, let's kick off this great agenda today with René Klein, my boss, but also the Senior Vice President of Westcon Europe. René, over to you.
Yeah, good morning, Daniel, and thanks for handing over. So good morning, everybody, and super excited to be one of the keynote speakers on this day 2 of our Imagine 2021 event. My session this morning will focus on changing in the go-to-market strategy of our vendors. What have we identified as opportunities for us, but also for you as our partners? How are we tackling them into our propositions? And to support you better as partners in the future, because this is all about partnership. So let's have a look on the next slide and some interesting callouts. In our opinion, laser focused on exploring, developing, and planning your customer journey is key for the future. All of you are addressing these opportunities, of course, in a different way. You are in a different segment, in a different vertical, but it's clear that there are some patterns to be recognized. It is clear that the end user is much more driven in his decisions in the business outcome or the ROI. Investing in a single technology for an isolated challenge is very unlikely in the near future. More and more technology solutions are touching multiple business processes and outcomes. Therefore, our advice to you is to invest in enhancing your product portfolio. And Westcon can help you in identifying the right vendors in the various technology areas. Daniel has already called it out, and one of the breakout sessions yesterday was also around our next generation solutions. And I will give you more insight on that later during my presentation. The economic climate, the pandemic situation, or a changing competitive landscape for your end user is constantly evolving. And we try to understand the business needs of your customers, and we advise you to evolve together with them. On the next slide, I will give you some markets insights. It's a busy slide, I know that, but TSIA stands for the Technology Services Industry Association, and they help tech companies to optimize their solutions and services proposition. They are monitoring the IT spend in multiple streams, And first of all, on the top end of this slide, there is a very, very clear message. We are in the right industry because the IT spend will grow in the next couple of years. But there is a definite change in where the money is spent. The area of growth, and it's highlighted in green, is certainly enterprise software, which includes also subscription and consumption-led models. Followed by IT services, which is consultancy, assessments, professional services, but certainly also in the journey, education. On the left-hand side at the bottom, there are two interesting conclusions. TSI is monitoring two segments of the technology industry. They have the TS50, which gives you insight on the performance of 50 traditional technology providers. The TSIA Cloud 40 is a group of 40 technology providers that moved in the last 5 years to become a managed technology provider. And you can clearly see a difference. You can see a difference in the revenue growth. You can see a difference in the subscription margin, as well in their services margin. The short-term challenge, and that's a challenge for all of us, is of course the operating income. It takes time to move from a traditional, let's call it an on-premise sale, into a more cloud-based subscription sale. However, if you just look at the margin gains, which are on the right-hand side in the TSI Cloud 40, the mid to longer term valuation of these companies is so much higher than when we stay providing traditional technologies. Let's move to the next slide. Within the vendor community, there is a clear big push to invest in the end user solution lifecycle. Some of them call it land, adopt, expand, renew. Others are calling it land, invest, protect, and sometimes even the word of surrender. But it's very clear, if you adopt this model, you have a more frequent contact with your customer. You understand much more clearer the business challenges that they have, and you can be seen as a trusted advisor. But you also create a much more predictable revenue stream yourself. How Westcon is tackling this challenge, I will show you in the next couple of slides. So what we created was a concept which we would call the circuit. And the circuit is telling you the storyboard that customer, that end user that you all have as partners will enjoy when he did the initial sale. Let me visualize that in the next slide. So the end user journey for you starts at the top with a purchase and a bill. And that's a great celebration that we all experience when the customer is placing that first PO. But after the 30 days, we think you need to go back to your customer and ask for an adopt and a consume call. What that clearly is that you ask the question to the customer, are you happy with the solution you bought? Do you really understand all the technology? Is there any education opportunity that we need to give you to one of your staff or teams? If that call has happened within 90 days or 120 days after the initial sale, you might be able to start talking about an expansion of the existing solution. And if applicable, in that journey, after 120 days, there might be a tech refresh within your install base at the end user side. And clearly, if the adoption call has happened, the expansion has been made or not, the tech refresh is an opportunity or not, we still, after 9 months, have the opportunity to renew. That will still remain and will not move away. Westcon's role in this whole circuit for you as a partner is, we can provide you the data of your install base, of the solutions, of course, that you have bought from us. We provide you with playbooks based on vendor technology. If there is a tech refresh opportunity, an expand opportunity, our teams has been working together with the vendors on positioning a Palo Alto, an F5, a Menlo, a CrowdStrike upsell. And with our education team, we can train all of you to have these conversations, because an adoption call is a different call to a customer than the initial call to get a seat at the table for that first purchase. But a tech refresh call is also a different call than an expansion call. And our teams have developed expertise training how to do these calls. To drive more comprehensive solution portfolio, Westcon has taken the following approach. And let's have a look on the next slide. So what we created is next generation solutions. And as mentioned earlier, it is focused on to much more drive the discussion into a business outcome than to have a single technology discussion. Therefore, we created the next generation solutions proposition, and it's focused on solution pillars. Daniel has already called that out earlier in his introduction call. We're going to focus today more on zero trust access, but we also have the next generation SOC, IoT and OT solutions, and looking at the business outcome for endpoints and mobiles. We have expanded our portfolio with very focused vendors like CrowdStrike, Ping Identity, Menlo, and others. And we created solution sets together with our current vendors in our portfolio to help you creating solutions that if your customer is asking for an endpoint or a zero trust solution, you can position either a single vendor or multi-vendor in the right way to understand the business requirements. How we have embedded that into our sales teams, I will explain on the next slide for you. So what we have done is we have enhanced our portfolio so we can offer our partners solution sets. That solution set is then delivered by a dedicated local development team in country. So what you will experience as a new point of contact outside of your account manager, or your vendor business development manager, is a dedicated NGS solution portfolio manager. He can create those solution sets for you, but of course, because this is a more technically driven sale, we need to bring that expertise as well in country. So what we have done in country is we created tech communities of our existing pre-sales, our existing consultants, our trainers in education, and our professional services engineers. And they can help you identify how to position new technologies into your end user base. Let's have a look how the partners have invested on that in the next slide. So what IDC has been seeing, and Stuart Wilson has called it out yesterday when you have attended also the speaker slot that he had during day one, that the partner landscape is changing, and IDC has looked at some interesting trends. You can read through the slide on the right-hand side, just an interesting couple of call-outs. COVID-19 has definitely accelerated the cloud momentum. Remote working is great. It's driving a lot of importance of security investment, cybersecurity investments. And recurring revenue streams are accelerating very fast in the last 12 months. If IDC is looking at the partner trends, we can clearly see two things. Already 49% of US partners have invested in next generation technology. You either have adopted technology or you have adopted vendors already in your portfolio, which is great to see. We're halfway there. But only 26% has currently invested in developing areas of specialization, because just putting a vendor logo on your line card is just a start. But you also need to recognize that you need to invest in either changing the skill set of your existing staff or recruiting extra resources to develop that specialism. Let's move to my last slide. So summarizing my message, the time is now. The world is changing. Do it within your own pace, but don't lose the momentum. COVID, economic climate is driving a lot into the cloud, is driving a lot into new business models. Companies are absolutely willing to invest in IT. You have seen that on my TSEIA slide. Everybody is investing. A digital agenda is there. Your momentum with your customers is there. Start accelerating your investments in building specialized sales and propositions. If we all do this, we have a great opportunity ahead of us. And with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our keynote speaker of today is a guy that I have just experienced. I need to pronounce it in the French way. So it is Hector Montségur. He's a security advisor, a sought-after keynote speaker, and a former black hat. His keynote today is around memoirs of a black hat and his perspective on the changing threat landscape. Hector, welcome to the event, and over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Renee. That was a fantastic presentation you had there. I have to say, it was so good that I decided not to show my presentation. And in fact, what I prefer that we do is have a conversation. So my name is Hector Montségur. I am a former bad guy, and I'm not here to glorify that, by the way. I'm hoping that we have some good takeaways from this. I'm hoping that with this conversation, you could walk away into another conversation with your colleagues, family members, and friends, and look at security a little bit different. When you look at me, you know, I'm sure you could tell I'm not a nation state actor. I'm not part of any specific government, but my operations, my techniques, my procedures, very much aligned with that of an APT, or an advanced persistent threat. And we're going to get to how I got to that point. Before I became that person, what I would categorize myself as was someone that was interested in cybersecurity. It was a way for me to really find myself, or find a career path for myself. And what allured me, rather, what was the allure for me was the whole concept of hacking. I was childish. It was childish. I was a teenager when I decided that I wanted to be a hacker. But what ended up happening is that I found such an amazing interest in cybersecurity research. I kind of figured out how things worked in the back end. I fell in love with Unix and programming languages. And I have to say that, it's been a hell of a ride. Okay. From being a young kid that was curious into becoming, all right, the bad guy. It was a long path of education. And that's very important. And I'm glad that Renee brought that up as a part of your process, because education is going to help all of us deal with this current climate. And hopefully, together, if we could work together, we'll be able to accomplish a lot when it comes down to our general security posture and consensus, right? So what do I do now? Well, after my whole situation as a black hat, I was arrested. I participated in some major campaigns against foreign governments around the world. Some of the stuff you may have even heard about. But what ended up happening is that I got to find myself going to prison and dealing with the consequences of my bad decisions. It allowed me to really focus on myself, learn to love myself, and learn to love security all over again. Becoming a practitioner and a researcher, and ignoring all the bad stuff that came with the whole hacking thing. So what made me, I would say the next question should be, well, Hector, so what made you so successful? And this is actually where perspective really goes a long way. What made me successful was persistence. Okay. At the end of the day, after your shift is done and you go home to spend time with your family and loved ones, you have the bad guy there waiting, the adversary, waiting for that moment. And it's very costly, not so much cost effective to have rapid defense teams, 24-hour shifts. As you can imagine, it's quite an expense on an organization. And not just that, it is a human cost. There is some major burnout when it comes to doing that kind of work. So, but I guess my point here is that my previous point was that, what made me successful as a black hat was not only persistence, but it was methodology. Okay. Methodology was extremely important because now I had a structure. Once I had a target in place, I knew that there was information gathering and asset discovery that was part of the first step. And that first step entailed looking for all sorts of information that would allow me to become or rather would allow me to have a successful campaign, whether it's DNS enumeration, looking at SSL certificates, finding assets that you may have forgotten about. And this is a one up for, hey, we need more asset management. Yeah. So having a methodology, having a structure, and then of course the persistence part was a major role. And then of course I would say that the final part of that was the end goal, right? As a black hat, when I was the bad guy, my focus was hacktivism. And that's when you take activism and hacking, you put them together. And usually the end goal is something very low key, a defacement of a web page with a message like, we are going to, we're anonymous and so on. Or the exfiltration of data that is extremely sensitive to an organization. Once we got to that point, once we got to the exfiltration point, that's when the target would really hurt. Okay. And I'm not proud of any of that, but the good thing is that we could have these conversations and I can explain what was going through my mind when that was happening. And you know what? It was just following the structure. Now, how could that apply to you and your organization or your clients? Well, that persistence, the methodology, the implementation, something touching on something that Renee said, it really resonated with me, which is, it's one thing to buy a bunch of products or to buy one product, and then to say, okay, I'm done. And the flip side of that is to educate yourselves and participate in conversations with the local development teams or local security teams that can help you understand, one, what the product does, and two, how to deal with implementation. So why is that important? Well, I'm going to give you an example because, let's move on from the black hat past and let's focus on what am I doing today. Aside from doing research and aside from being an advisor, I am a red teamer. I'm still on the offensive. The only difference is now is that I'm helping clients understand how it is that I got into their environments and what it is they need to do to remediate those issues I exploited. So the cool thing with that is that I get to experience on a day-to-day all the different kind of issues that organizations are dealing with now, and I could make the correlation, or even I can make the comparison between what I saw breaking into networks back 5-10 years ago, before I was arrested and before I had to deal with consequences. And so what am I seeing? And I'm sure many of you already know the answer. Most of the issues that were successfully exploited back in my time as a black hat are very much still alive. There's still asset management issues. There's organizations that really don't know what kind of software or assets they own on an internal, external network. And I have to say, that's really a scary one for me. The next one is a lot of organizations have issues understanding the difference between authorization and authentication. And once you start to deal with bad implementations of either or, then you start to have issues where you have attackers compromising your infrastructure from low privilege escalation, or rather low privilege users, and using those users to escalate privileges. So the question is, okay, so we're seeing the same kind of issues. We're seeing the same kind of problems. Now, what happened to all of these solutions, okay, that have been deployed over the years, that have been released over the years? And I have to say, many of them work. They do work. But I think that we're also evolving and moving into a place where, we get to explore new technologies. Like I love the fact that organizations, not only clients, not only vendors, but Westcon and Renee and Daniel, we're all talking about, zero trust access, and we're talking about DevOps security. I mean, these are things that excite me. Like I really am excited because, even though we've had conversations about DevOps security, or we have conversations about zero trust, implementation has been extremely hard. Now, I want to leave you with some examples because, the best thing that I can do, and the thing that I aim for here, is to provide you guys some context and perspective. So as a red teamer, there's one recent example where I was doing an audit for a customer. They had a very mature security team. I'm sure they had, there were customers or vendors here today. They had all sorts of products and solutions. They had all sorts of EDR and host-based mitigation systems and detection systems. They had SIMs and rapid defense deployment teams. Okay, we get it, right? Now, I use a very simple method of lateral movement on the network. And what was it? We're going to cut it short because I know my time here is running out. But I ended up using IPv6 for moving across the network. And so you have to ask yourself, well, Hector, why was it that you were able to move around across the network with IPv6 and not get caught? And here's the problem. When the security solutions, the solutions that were supposed to watch me, were implemented, this was post configuration of IPv6, or rather prior to the implementation of IPv6, the products were not configured to monitor IPv6 traffic. That's just as simple as it gets. And those simple misconfigurations or those simple oversights will cost you not only your brands, but it'll cost you everything at that point. Especially here in the US. I know Europe is different. You guys have a lot of very strict laws. The US is catching up in a way where, if you're compromised, if you're not alerting your customers, you're going to have attorney generals essentially suing you. And that's their way of trying to, to provide some, I would say, clarity to the victims, and to make victims feel better that something's happening. Unfortunately, by then it's too late. So we've talked about methodology and why it's important as a black hat. But how is that important to an organization that's defending? I think that methodology and structure is extremely important for both the offensive and defensive sides. I personally, one of the recommendations I always give to my clients is, well, look, security is complex, is extremely broad, is always changing, is always evolving. So we have to be preemptive and we have to be proactive about our security measures. All it takes is one or two hungry security engineers on your team to really keep you up to date and up to speed and making sure that, when there's new vulnerabilities coming out, you guys are looking at solutions. Or, with one of the vendors here, you have a team that's monitoring your assets and know exactly when, an issue arises and when you need to resolve that issue sooner than later. And so, here's another one. This is another really good example I want to share with all of you. And that is that aside from the obvious, right, the human element, which we're going to push it aside over here. And you have the issue with asset management, which is another major issue we're going to push to the side here. The cool thing is that when you look at something like Zero Trust, which is, a major part of today's conversation, I'm actually really glad about that. I want to stick around and watch. But the truth of the matter is that something like a Zero Trust solution is going to start to help organizations deal with those kind of issues that have plagued us for quite some time. Well, what would happen if our secretary gets compromised? What's the worst case scenario? Is our secretary able to log into the network via VPN at 4 a.m. on a Saturday? No, right? So it all depends on your profile. It depends on behavior analytics, and all these different solutions are trying their best, to provide you that solution. The final thing, one of the final points I want to make here is that, when you're building out your security program, or even if you're dealing with clients, because I know that a lot of you folks here mostly deal with clients as opposed to, dealing with the security for your own network. But when you're dealing with your clients, the best thing that you could always, just throw out there as part of the conversation is, well, let's talk about the scope. Let's talk about the question and the problem that you have. And let's see if we could come up with a solution that's going to make all of us happy here. That's going to make sense to everybody in this conversation. Because otherwise, if you just want me to sell your product, then there's nobody learning anything, right? Going back to what Renee said in the beginning, looking at ways to educate not only ourselves, but our clients. If we cannot do that as a society, as a community, as a group of people that are, interested or involved in the security industry, then we're going to repeat history for the next 10 years all over again. Okay. I've been in the scene since the 90s when I was 12 years old. And what were the issues back then? And what are the differences with now, right? So in those days, yeah, you had the human element. You had social engineering as a problem. You had passwords as a problem. But in those days, vulnerabilities, were exploited by 0 days, and those 0-day exploits were created by groups, and those groups would release those exploits to certain communities, smaller communities, and they would share exploits back and forth. I would know. I would get those exploits. Now it's a little bit different. The community has changed. Most of those exploits you would find in the arsenal or toolkit of an APT group or a nation state. Okay. If you are compromised, unfortunately, at that point, it probably wasn't much you could do. But, and that's a big one. Even if you're compromised by a 0-day that nobody knew even existed, what really helps you is, well, that initial risk management conversation, or that initial risk assessment. Well, what's the worst case scenario? This is a great question. What's the worst case scenario if we're compromised? What happens next? What can we do from here? And who's involved and who's responsible for dealing with the compromise? And if our security products fail, then who do we talk to? Is it a matter of bad implementation, or is it because, just things just happen? And which they do. But in most cases, implementation. And that's really one of my key points here, ladies and gentlemen, that I want you to walk away understanding that you may have all these great products, and I assure you, many of them or most of them work fantastic. But whether you're selling it or implementing it yourself, you want to have a good understanding as to one, how it works, but also two, how can I make it work better? How can I make this maximize my security posture? And how can I pass that information forward? And if I have any questions or have any enhancements or suggestions, can I work with my vendor for those improvements? So there's a lot of cool stuff here. I mean, I hope that most of you had some great takeaways. I'm always available on LinkedIn if you ever want to have a conversation or even ask a question. I'm definitely open for that. But I love security. I mean, I'm sure you could tell by my passion. Like, it's really a thing that I enjoy. And I hope that most of you get to enjoy it as well. It's really fun, especially once you start to understand the fundamental issues that are at hand. And there's one final point. There's one final point that I want to say. I know it's been very hard for all of us dealing with the pandemic, and it's had all sorts of effects, economical and, of course, health-wise. But the good thing is that, I'm personally seeing on the red teamer side that a lot of organizations are opening up again. All those budget freezes, all those hiring freezes are starting to close down, or rather they're starting to close in general. And, you're seeing nonstop contracts and engagements. You also had this situation with SolarWinds, which was a major issue. And I think also torpedoed the timeline in regards to, well, when are we going to be able to bring in vendors again? Or when can we move on to the next step, right? And we need to take advantage of that as a community, not only just to be vendors here, but to make a difference. We all can make a difference if we work together. And that's pretty much the gist of it. Just keep your minds open and look forward towards tomorrow, and really explore and really understand the next gen of security products and tools, right? It's one thing to say, well, I believe in zero trust. I think zero trust is amazing, but it would also be fantastic if you understood how the technology works. Why? Because when it's time for you to have a conversation with a customer or client that really wants to actually know the answer, you could provide it. You could provide it. And it's going to take you a very, very long way. So my time is wrapping up here. I just want to say thank you to WestCon, to Renee, to Daniel, Alex, and the rest of the team for really making this happen. I'm very appreciative of the fact that you guys want to hear a, old retired black hat. But I have to say that it's been an absolute pleasure. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm a teddy bear, so we're good. And that's it, guys. Pass it back to you.
Okay. Hector, thanks for that perspective, interesting perspective. And first of all, also thank you for waking up that early, because I know you're New York based and it is 6 hours earlier than I'm having here in the Netherlands. So first of all, thanks for that. A very, very interesting perspective. Really good to hear you talking about also your way of working. You choose a methodology, you have a target, and then having a structure in place to get there. I translate that into my recommendation in my earlier presentation, which is focus. And important takeaways, I think, from Hector's perspective are educate ourselves and educate the customer. Implementation is crucial, but it is sometimes very, very challenging because it is complex technology that we are implementing and we need to understand the business outcome and the business needs. One takeaway and advice that I have, as Westcon is also your trusted advisor, don't end up in jail. That is my recommendation to all of you. Then we will have a big, big challenge all to capture and capitalize on the IT spends in the next few years. That's my recommendation to you. And we strongly believe in innovate to differentiate. That's the theme of the event. And we are very, very honored to have a great panel to share and discuss how partners can use innovation to expand new markets. So let's start with introducing the panelist of the panel discussion today. Mike, let's start with you. Mike, welcome.
Rene, many thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm honoured that you're honoured to have me here today. Thank you very much for inviting me to the panel. Very much looking forward to the debate with my fellow panelists.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Klaus, can you please introduce yourself?
I can, yeah. Hey, Rene. Hey, all. I'm Klaus. I look after the NGINX side of the business within F5 Networks. Pleased to be here with the rest of you.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. Jonas, good morning.
Good morning. So happy to be here on this panel. So my name is Jonas. I'm a field CTO. The company name might be wrong these days because we were acquired by Ivanti. So we're now part of the greater Ivanti, and I'm actually working in the Ivanti security division. So other than that, I'm covering basically EMEA and APJ from that perspective.
Okay, thanks, Jonas. The last panelist, Rob, certainly last but not least.
Hi everyone, Rob Otto here, working with Ping Identity based in the UK, also a field CTO covering the Europe, Middle East and Africa region.
Okay, thanks Rob for your introduction. So a great selection of 4 panelists, but we're looking for number 5, and that number 5 panelist is everybody in this event. So you're number 5. And you're part of influencing the discussions. So in form of a single word answer, we're going to start the word cloud. What strategies to expand into new markets are you exploring, or what to find out more about? So the event host will start with the word cloud. You can submit your one-word response. We're going to have a look at how this is evolving, and you can vote for other responses as well. And the word will tell us and drive the conversation. So let's start with the word cloud. I'm just going to follow what is happening, and then after 1.5, 2 minutes, we will just take it from there, and we will start having the discussion. So Alex, over to you to start the word cloud. If something is happening, here we go. Okay, so type in your word and we will see the word cloud evolving. I can see that MSP is still big. Curiosity, that's an interesting one. It's more the driver for this whole world cloud. I'm curious to understand where this is going. So 5G, indeed, a lot of things are happening within 5G. I can see the AWS marketplace. Any supporters of the Microsoft Azure?
I'm just wondering if using a hyphen is cheating. in the one word.
Yeah, curiosity is the big word, but it's that's an interesting one. Cloud adoption. SASE, one of the new buzzwords. Yeah.
Zero trust sneaking in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Nobody said blockchain yet. That's surprising.
Mm-hmm. Born in the cloud. New generation. The edge is
curious people.
Yeah. The edge is also an interesting one. Everywhere security. Wow, okay, let's see. Cloud adoption. Big thing, SASE is becoming more interesting for them. Wow, okay. As the word cloud is still moving, I'm just gonna leave it for another 30 seconds, and then we're gonna take it from there. So let's see if there are new buzzwords popping up. I think we're coming to a final conclusion. The topics that are still highlighted are the most important ones. I would say, Alex, we will stop the word cloud, and we're going to take it from there. So let's go back to the question: what strategies to expand into new markets are you exploring, or what to find out more about? So yeah, let's take it from here. And cloud adoption was the let's say the major call out, together with SASE and Zero Trust. So let's start with cloud adoption. Mike, can I have your perspective on cloud adoption?
Certainly. Being a SaaS vendor, it clearly is something I'm very passionate about. But more importantly, I've been passionate about the whole idea of SaaS for many years. If you think a little bit about the evolution of the market in terms of the business that we are all in, our resellers, us as vendors, selling to our customers, you think about the business and how it's evolved. If you think back, I mean, some of you, hopefully not as old as myself, can remember perhaps selling in the 80s. And essentially, we went through a revolution whereby you went from the mainframe and the green screen to having desktop PCs, kindly introduced to us by IBM back in the 80s, and that was a great opportunity for resellers to take a demand, a customer demand. They wanted to take this product, and they didn't really have much choice. So they came to you to buy those devices. You sold those devices, and the customers put them on their desktops, and then we all made some good money, and customers were happy. Fast forward to now, 21st century. I've long believed, certainly for the last 4 or 5 years, it makes no sense to have this centralized infrastructure and everybody pour into a central glass edifice or an office doing their daily job and going home again. As a technologist at heart, I've always thought, why are we not using our cloud capability? And I've always felt that migration to a cloud is more of a mindset and less of a technology issue. And I've always felt that one of the areas that we should be innovating is encouraging our customers to move away from these glass edifices, move away from these centrally held infrastructures, and move more to remote workers with more empowerment using more cloud. So for me, I think the innovation really has to be, if you look at what's happened to us, the fact that here we all are, we're not all sat on a stage with the lights beaming down on us. We're not in some remote location, although that'd be quite nice at the moment, having not left my home, it feels like weeks. We are all here sat at home using our technology. And I think now is the time for us to take innovation to our customers. If you think about the last year, our customers have spent this last year probably firefighting, battling with risk and audit and compliance, and trying to make workers effective working from home. And every day I speak to a customer and there is some kind of constraint they're dealing with. And I think now is the time for us as technology ambassadors to be able to perhaps take some of that strain off the organizations and then take new ideas to them. And I really hope that some of the learnings that our customers, us as vendors and our partners have got from the last year, I really hope it's a renaissance of technology and what technology can bring to to the user.
Mike, yeah, thank you for that interesting call out. And let's move to Klaus. So we're talking about cloud adoption, but one of the call out that I took from Mike is cloud is a mindset. So Klaus, can you take it from here?
Yeah, I can try. Yeah, I got a strong passion for cloud, obviously, since we're type of bond in the cloud company. I also have a bit of a strong vision on this cloud adoption, and I think the push in the industry and especially the messaging you would see, and I'm not trying to call out any specifics here, but you see a strong push in the industry of people talking about cloud first approach, and I love getting pulled into a conversation with customers about cloud first, because what is cloud first and what does it actually mean, and do we really care? And that's a very strong that's a very strong comment. You know, do we care? Because in my world, and we all care about applications, and I think that's the key thing here. And then figuring out how we can make cloud working that aspect is the interesting part for me, at least that thing. So the specific call out was cloud adoption, and I think that's an interesting thing, because everybody knows that our customers is talking about moving things to the cloud, and I think we also had people, our customers, coming to us and saying we've tried cloud and it was too expensive, and then we're insourcing again. So I think the whole aspect of cloud adoption is the simplification of how we pull things into the cloud, and how we then help people be more flexible and agile in that environment, and that was the core intent of cloud computing, if you ask me.
Yeah. So Klaus, thank you for that. Let's move to Jonas. PulseSecure really accelerated their revenue streams during COVID with your VPN secure client, of course.
Sure.
But Jonas, from a PulseSecure/Ivanti perspective, cloud adoption.
Sure, I think I'm going to have a slightly more negative side on this, because what I see is that we have a tendency in the business to look at broad concepts. You say cloud, what do you mean? I'm totally, for SaaS applications, and we see people moving into kind of SaaS architecture like Office 365. It's been very beneficial for many customers, easy way to get services. However, there is a big risk of lock-in in those environments as well, that I think a lot of companies are not really realizing until they're sitting there. So that's one. The other part of cloud adoption is then people moving into AWS or Azure for their own private applications, starting publishing their own environments and unleashing the DevOps teams. And I think that the problem I see there is education. A lot of customers just trying to make a copy and paste of their existing data center into those environments. And that's not what they were built for. And I see this this hyper convergence, or this kind of hybrid IT. Biggest problem is the traditional data center is very network focused. Everything is around subnet access and ports and stuff. As soon as you move to cloud, it's very obvious in an IaaS environment, you're going to publish an application. And there come these kind of contradictions between security teams. How are we going to solve this? Because over here, we're talking network. Over here, we're talking application. And that's a journey for the operations of that customer to try to smooth out. And that is a challenge. I tell you, talking to these customers, they say, okay, we're going to move over to application. That's fine in the IaaS. But then you talk to the guy with the data center. I say, I have 600 applications on 50 subnets. I can't figure this out now. I need to get a simpler solution to this, okay? So that's where I see my keyword back would be make sure you educate yourself and understand the environments you're moving into, because they're not the old world. It's a completely new world. And if you don't move to the cloud with that in mind, you're just going to fail. And that's going to, as Klaus said, you're going to end up with a very expensive experience rather than potentially a very good experience.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonas. Rob, over to you, of course, your perspective on cloud adoption.
So I think one of the really interesting things about cloud, and we're talking about, I mean, the context here is talking about opportunities to expand into new markets, right? Is that the fact that cloud adoption is happening pretty much everywhere actually gives us a really good way to expand into markets where let's say we don't have a physical presence, right? So in days gone by, if you wanted to move into a completely new territory that you weren't in, you would have to be physically present, not only with people, but with infrastructure. I think being present in a territory with people still remains very important. But the chances are very good that, wherever you're looking to go and to expand next, the likes of Amazon and Microsoft and Google are probably already there with, data centers, with cloud infrastructure that you can just build upon. So from that perspective, I think, cloud certainly presents a lot of opportunities for us to grow. I do also want to kind of echo what Jonas said, though, about being cognizant of some of the risks, or at least being aware of some of the challenges that cloud brings. Vendor lock-in, of course, is a big one. We sort of talk about the rule of three in terms of sort of monopolistic behavior. I actually heard about this last night in a different context around drug companies, right? But I think the same thing really applies here. Is that, and a number of the organizations that we're dealing with are very concerned, particularly in the subject matter area that we work in, which is identity and access management. What is the implication, or what are the potential risks of locking your identities, locking your authentication into a single platform provider, with that sort of tendency to pull everything towards themselves, right? So, so that's one thing that you have to consider. But I think the other thing to consider as well is that while organizations across the globe of every size and every complexity and every sort of, age or heritage see cloud as their future, I think for those who weren't born in the cloud, their reality and their reality probably for some time to come is more likely to be hybrid in terms of assets on premises that, it doesn't make sense to move to cloud yet. Again, you don't want to just lift and shift something that's been running well in your data center into a cloud data center just for the sake of it. And then again, there are also, in a lot of cases, regulatory concerns preventing certain types of data from being, moved out of country or even out of your own data center. So, yeah, really excited. I mean, we are very much, full steam ahead with cloud, and it's what the majority of our new customers are asking for. But, I think the reality, the hybrid reality of those on-premises assets, which still need to be remembered, need to be included in your security posture, need secure and seamless access enabled, are still really important as well.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, we have in the industry, not we as a panelist, but in the industry, we have a habit of just using all kinds of buzzwords and then not really trying to understand how we can simplify this to get the customer convinced that we're selling the right solution to that customer. And that was one of my major call outs as well in my presentation. It's all about, let's say, understanding the business outcome and not really focus on that habit of calling out technology. You, as an end user, you must go to the cloud, because what will that bring? Go to the cloud. Let's move to the next buzzword that was, let's say, bigger than anybody else, than anything else. That was SASE, so Security Access Service Edge. So, Mike, your perspective on that?
I think it's long overdue. And again, perhaps that plays into what I was saying earlier. As you would guess, perhaps I look at this slightly differently. I'm responsible for running a business, making sure salespeople sell stuff. So I always look at it as an opportunity to grow a business. So it's not so much it's a buzzword. For me, it's a logical conclusion. It's, for a long time now, if you look at I've worked in both sides. I've worked in networking, I've worked in security. And if you look at how networking has evolved and how it's becoming more software defined, and if you look at security, how it's becoming more of a SaaS play, to me, it's a logical conclusion. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. I personally think this is the way the market needs to be going. I think large organizations, whether you're in pharmaceutical, whether you're in defense, whether you're in finance, I'm sure they'd much rather be focusing their time and money on their core competence, which is finance or pharmaceuticals, and less on infrastructure. And I think that SASE is a great vehicle for the user of the technology to focus more time and money on running their business and less time on trying to shore it up. And that probably also brings us to on our next point, MSP, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But again, me personally, I love the idea of SASE, and I think it plays into where I think the market ought to go, having watched a lot of the evolution from mainframes through to where we are now, remote working over the internet.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Klaus, F5, of course, also with NGINX. Very application driven, and the application is driving a lot of security and a lot of opportunities as well. What's your perspective on either SASE or MSSPs? We can also move to that topic as well, but your perspective.
Yeah, so first of all, I think SASE goes in hand with cloud adoption, right? I mean, if you want to go cloud, you need to make sure that you're safe and whatever you put there is protected in some kind of way or form. So I think it goes hand in hand. And Rob, I love you calling out, login in the cloud and stuff like that, which I think is also very, very. I was afraid of going with that term, but thanks for doing that for me. So. But I think those are the kind of things that, if we're not in control, if we don't feel safe when we put applications or core business functions into the cloud, the adoption is not going to be there, right? So it pretty much all starts with security. And yes, that came from the DevOps guy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jonas.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to my kind of original statement. I think SASE is an interesting thing, just as zero trust. I mean, I come from an organization where we started to talk about no trust. I love the wording of zero trust, but we talked about no trust about 8-9 years ago. We've been deploying it for 7 years. So when it became popular, it was like, yeah, that's in our genes. But to me, SASE actually, to view it from a slightly different angle, I think it's a cry from the industry and the customers, or actually not the industry, but more the customers, for a need to have an organization or an organized way to couple their security solutions together. It has been very kind of isolated. You buy this from vendor A or vendor B, but now as you start to see SD-WAN, you see SDN, you see all of these networking WAN components, and there is a need to tie it all together. Now, fascinating enough, all of a sudden, Gartner, if you look at their look at SASE, it's a huge pile of things that needs to be coordinated. And then every vendor still comes out and say, we have SASE. I don't believe in that. I don't believe there are very few vendors that can actually turn around and satisfy all those needs. So to me, SASE is much more of getting a framework together where you can put the different pieces together with open APIs and actually orchestrate this thing in a way that makes sense to the customer. Going back to Mike's comment, solving customer problems. I mean, I've been in so many conversations with customers during COVID-19 where they just said, I need zero trust, I need SASE. When we actually looked at their business need, they needed a VPN. So we shouldn't get tied into the technology to say what they need. Look at the business problem and value sell what they need. Solving their problem to me is much more important than which technology I'm using. So to me, SASE is one of these buzzwords, as together with zero trust, that gets people's attention. But then you need to rapidly come down to the level of saying, what is your business problem? And at the end, it might not be any of those that is the solution to their problem. Okay.
So Jonas, thanks for that. So Rob, just not asking you the question also about SASE, but I would like to connect that also to one of the call outs that Hector was doing, which was related, and Jonas called it out as well. It's education. How are we going to educate the channel? And it's not that the channel is not able to adopt that, but the industry is really good in putting all these kinds of buzzwords out. How are we going to make sure that the channel is equipped to ask the right questions?
So, I mean, first thing, I think Jonas and I, if we were in a different world, would certainly enjoy a beer or two after this chat, because I found myself nodding along with a lot of what he said. perhaps somewhat ironic, SASE and Zero Trust as buzzwords, and I'll be doing a presentation a little bit later on ping identity and how we enable Zero Trust, right? So we're probably not completely blameless in this thing as well.
Not
education. I mean, this education in this world. I mean, it's hugely important. When I see something like SASE come out mooted by Gartner, I mean, then I went and had a look at what that architecture looks like, and I mean, Jonas, I had pretty much the same immediate reaction. It's like, wow, this is a way to stitch together lots of different components, but it's also a way that's been defined at a really sort of functional, very high level. You spoke about open APIs. I mean, I would go a little bit further. Lessons learned from some of the things that we've seen in the identity and access management world is that open standards are the thing that we need in order to make something like SASE a deliverable reality. Mm-hmm. So heading back into the kind of the education side of things in terms of educating the channel, yes, understanding what are the specific problems that a customer needs to solve, and then mapping that back to which particular pieces of a SASE-like architecture or a Zero Trust architecture they actually need. And again, this kind of ties back to this whole concept of sort of expanding into new markets, using channel partners to be places that we can't be as technology vendors. I think that the education that is needed there is really in terms of trying to draw that thread from what you hear first down to being able to through let's say a consultative selling process to understand what is the actual need, and then based on expertise, I think, which was another word that came up in our word cloud, how to then map that onto the best solution or set of solutions or products within the basket of what you sell or what you distribute to really be able to solve that customer's problem. And I mean, as we know from a security point of view, right, where security issues tend to occur is the cracks or the gaps in between different product implementations. And this to me is another thing that's really useful about the channel, is that broad knowledge or that broad view across their market and also across their product portfolio, understanding what is the right way to kind of weave these individual technologies together to provide an overall solution. So to me, and again, I will concede in a minute or two, another 10 seconds. To me, it's far more compelling if a trusted partner presents a SASE architecture that weaves together a number of product offerings when they have deep expertise in all of those product offerings and they know how they work together. Then if a vendor presents a SASE slide and says, our product does this bit, this bit, this bit, this bit, and this bit, but the rest of it is kind of up to you. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's a really good call. I think it's one of the reasons why we started this next generation solutions team, just to understand, let's say, more focus on how are we bringing solutions together, because the world is not any longer a single point vendor isolated solution. It is complex. It is touching a lot of, let's say, applications. It's touching a lot of business processes. So not really automation or an application. It's touching the process of an end user as well. So one of the things that because I also want to move a little bit away from all kinds of, let's say, techie discussions, because zero trust was a big word as well. But I would like to have your view as well on market intelligence. So it's not about digital first, but it's about helping the partners in identifying where is the real opportunity with an end user, and how should we combine market intelligence together in then coming up with the right solution. So, Mike, if I may start with you, from your perspective, how can we make the partner, or how can we equip the partner with more intelligence out of the market to help him position the right things? You can combine it if you want with also the demos or proof of concepts. That's probably are part of that, So market intelligence will drive probably a solution outcome. But then coming back to Rob's statement about education, etc. as well, your view on market intelligence and the demos and POCs.
Sure. So what I'll start with is that, first of all, the status quo has changed for buyers and sellers alike. It's not just the customer that's having to adapt to this new world, and it's not just the seller that's having to adapt to this new world. So for the first few months, everybody was scrabbling around to try and get some kind of normality. And then they spent the following few months figuring out how can we either A, capitalize on the situation, or B, to stabilize it to get back to some kind of normal. Whatever that normal is, whatever people get back to, it still means that something is going to have to change. And I genuinely don't believe that we'll go back to exactly the way it was. I'm not saying that everybody will continue to work from home, but organizations that are being forced perhaps to take more of a cloud-based approach. I've not come across anyone yet that said, okay, COVID's forced me to go down the SASE route, but it's certainly probably forced more people to go down the cloud route. And I do think this is more of an opportunity, and I think Rob touched on this. This is more of an opportunity for the partner to establish value. A valuable relationship between a buyer and a seller is when both sides see value. The seller sees value, they've made money, and the buyer sees value because they've solved the problem at the right price point. And again, I think Rob touched on this, and possibly even Klaus. Where I think this is important is that, yes, someone could sit in the Menlo booth tomorrow and see our SASE presentation, and they could sit and watch Rob's Ping Identity presentation. But that is our perspective on the world. And then you'll get the customer's perspective on the world as well. And I think this is probably the most exciting time probably in the last 30 years of technology selling, which is what we do. I think it's probably the most exciting time in the last 30 years for these partners to become the expert, to become the, not necessarily the integrator, but to become that list, that sounding post about what do you think we should be doing? Because the partner has the luxury of perhaps sitting through Klaus's or Jonas's or Rob's sessions over the next few days. And they go, yes, this technology sounds great. This technology sounds great. And it's probably slightly bewildering for the buyer. And I think the partner has the opportunity to take information from people like Gartner, people like IDC, people like Forrester, do as much research as possible. And they then have the honest broker conversation with the customer. So I think it's such a nice market at the moment. I might even go create my own reseller.
So, Mike, one of the things that we also see happening, and I'm happy to hear your view, but Klaus, Rob, and Jonas as well. I think more and more partners are open also to partner with other partners, where historically partners were, let's say, trying to develop their own practice. Doesn't really matter what the end user is asking, but I'm gonna find it out my own way, and I'm gonna take that product on board. And what we see, and that's also an advice to everybody that is on this call, you can't be a specialist in everything. No. Don't go that route. We see a lot of our partners working closely together to say, well, I'm an expert in cybersecurity, I'm an expert in authentication, but I'm not an expert in video conferencing, or I'm an expert in identity access, but I'm not an expert in firewalling.
Yeah.
So working together and partnerships, I think, is also crucial, because only in this panel we have 4 vendors and they all have their unique technology solutions. Probably they will all fit together for the next end user request that a partner will have. But how are we going to work together? How can I get that expertise and bring that expertise into my own company? Is not by starting your own specialisms yourself. Look at partners. There are partners that are not conflicting with you as a partner, but can work very closely in identifying and securing your customer relationship. So I think that is also an important advice. So Klaus, POCs, I want to have your perspective about demos and POCs. How are we going to convince the end user, and what is the importance of a POC?
I'll get to the POC. I think education here is a key thing, right? And I think it's a good call out, Rob, on that as well, right? So, and I want to bring it up and emphasize as well one of the things we've discussed around buzzwords. I mean, I obviously represent the DevOps side of this conversation, and let me be the first one to call it out as an education here, and pinch on the curiosity that it obviously is also in the group of attendees. There is no thing as a DevOps, right? There is nobody that you're selling to that cares about development and operations at the same time, right? So I think it's very, very important on the education side that we identify who are the personas that we're actually talking to, and what do they care about, and how do we sell to them. If you go in with a full-on message, with a DevOps message, and you're hitting a developer, he doesn't care about how you operate things. He just cares about building great code and having it in production 5 minutes later, right? And that's the worry of the operations or the security side of the business, right? This crazy developer drinking Coca-Cola and eating pizza all day, he's throwing code at me all the time. How do I make sure that I get it into production in a safe way and without compromising the compliance and the regulations that we have to live up to as an organization? So I think with that, I think that the proof of concept is important here, but I think the educational side of this is much more important to understand what we're actually trying to do, what we're trying to achieve, and how do we use these type of open APIs that I think it was you, Rob, as well, calling it out, and then how do we secure the things without compromising the existing business. And POCs is a great way of doing that. I think we as an industry, we as a vendor, need to be a lot more flexible on having things that are easier for the partners to work on, to make it easy for them to integrate different type of solutions and different types of offerings within the same POC. So let's together as an industry see how we can make that more open and more, flexible for the combinations of different technology working together in the POC.
Thank you, Klaus. We have some interesting questions in our comment box as well. So as you know, you can ask some questions, and within 5 minutes I need to wrap up this session. So for Jonas and for Rob, let me take one of the questions and ask your perspective on that. So the question is, what is the next new, between brackets, fast-growing thing you guys see in Azure cloud security, and perhaps the same question on the endpoint, since we all work from home. So let's start with Jonas.
You guys see specifically in the Azure cloud, that's an interesting thing, So from an Azure perspective, I think what we see is Microsoft is investing heavily in security. They're doing actually a very great job as well, so we can't complain about anything. I come from a tradition of not trusting anything coming out of Microsoft for decades, but I actually have to admit that these guys are getting stuff done in a good way. I personally can say that I've seen that new thing. It's all about getting the customers into Azure AD, starting to use their conditional access, starting to tie it tighter into Autopilot, and getting all the devices registered into Intune. And this is where I started to talk about this kind of, maybe start to look at the lock-in, because as the further you creep into that environment, you might get stuck. And I mean, I always tell my customers that there are a lot of great tools to move an on-prem AD to the cloud. There's no tools going in the other direction. I mean, that just doesn't exist, and there's good reason for that. So I can't say that I have anything like fast-growing thing for the next. On the endpoint, I think that's been. I mean, I want to go back to the earlier question, Renee, just quickly, because I say, to me, a customer can have either a tactical or a strategic solution. So I always try to figure out, is this tactical? So in the beginning of COVID-19, it was just tactical. And then it's fine to buy a siloed solution just to solve a problem. If you're going to do a strategic decision, then it comes into more of these SASE discussions or zero trust discussions. The challenge, though, is that if you look at the customer you're selling to, how are they organized? If you try to sell a SASE, that might be very hard, because if the customer is organized in silos, I'm only talking to the persona doing remote access. He doesn't care about WAN. So that means you need to get higher up in the organization to get the CISO, the CIO, to understand the value of bringing all this together. And I think it's there, but then down in the organization, I think a POC, as you mentioned, many times are too early, because you say, let's show me in a POC. And then there's no strict rules on what the business outcome of that POC is. It's just showing some tech. So really a good POC for me has this kind of, this is the business problem we're going to solve. And if I can show you that in a good way, then you're going to buy. Okay. That kind of is a real POC to me.
Okay. Thanks.
Not kicking the tires.
Yeah. Rob, your perspective as well on what's the next new. If the studio could bring up that question again, that would be great.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to necessarily just repeat what Jonas has said. I absolutely share. I share concerns regarding the monolithic nature of some of the Azure cloud security, Azure AD offerings. I will call out something that I think Microsoft are doing really well, and that they're really helping the industry with, is that Microsoft, along with a number of others in the industry, are really pushing hard for passwordless authentication using WebAuthn, using the FIDO2 standard. Sorry, that's a very techie answer, but that's something that across, certainly across, I would say, the authentication, multi-factor authentication type of industry, we all agree is a very good standard. It's a good set of standards that moves the industry forward towards passwordless, another buzzword, but one that has a lot of benefits. Microsoft do have a unique position in the industry, of course, is that because they are so widely used, they, when they educate and when they evangelize around a particular topic, it tends to get a lot of attention. I know some of the folks at Microsoft who working very hard on ensuring that their platform enables FIDO2 and really pushes it aggressively. And again, they're doing a good thing there. I mean, from an endpoint perspective, I mean, this to me is the next great frontier, right? I mean, again, Jonas, you mentioned Intune. Endpoints are hard because there is more than one type of endpoint. There are millions of different types of endpoints, millions of different things that could potentially go wrong with those endpoints. But again, we've had this traditional sort of disconnect between endpoint management or mobile device management, or there's another buzzword for it that I can't remember now. And the other sort of tenets of, let's call it, zero trust authentication around user, around context. And there's always been this kind of, well, what do you do? Do you trust the device? Do you trust the user? How do you manage that relationship between users and devices? And there are a lot of, I would say, solutions that are way too homogeneous in that space, right? Where they're making the assumption that every endpoint is a Windows 10 desktop or laptop, or every endpoint is a Mac, or every endpoint is an Android phone. What we're looking for, and again, I'll beat the drum for open standards in this area, is a way for us to use or leverage a number of different endpoint management solutions that is able to give us really deep intelligence that's specific to that particular endpoint. An iOS device can be jailbroken, an Android phone can be rooted. A Windows laptop can have an antivirus definition that's out of date. These are very important security posture things that you want to know about the endpoint, but it's specific to that particular endpoint. And I think we're still looking for a really good competitive market and platforms that can help us to bring all of that information together.
Okay, thanks, Rob. As we are only have 3 minutes left, I want to have the question, if the studio can pop that question that was from the audience, what about OT and IoT security? And I would like to give Mike and Klaus both 1 minute opportunity to respond on this. And then we're going to wrap up. So Mike, firstly, over to you.
Certainly. So for me, OT, IoT is the soft underbelly, which is probably even easier for your determined attacker, probably more likely to be nation state than perhaps small organizations trying to make a few pound. For me, it's probably slightly more worrying. And if you're a large organization that has industrial control systems, it's probably the thing that keeps you up most at night. Protecting your end user, moving to cloud, SASE are probably the tip of the iceberg, the easier things to solve. I actually think this is the harder thing to solve, but it's all on the same journey. It doesn't matter which bit you plug, you're going to get attacked one way or another. Whether you get attacked because your user clicks on something they shouldn't do, or whether you get attacked because somebody's found a way into an industrial control system and is going to inject more chlorine into a water treatment plant, or even worse. I don't think we're going to have a solution for this anytime soon. I think it's going to be a continual, headline news maker. But for the time being, in what we all do here on this panel, I guess most of our focus is enabling the user to be more effective at work. But I genuinely think that it's the IoT, OT side that is perhaps the soft underbelly that we need to worry more about.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Klaus, over to you.
Thanks, and I'll do it really short, like because I'm obviously the biggest security expert on this panel. So I think it's terrible, right? But I'm more into the development side of this, and as I said in the beginning, I think it's important when you look at of multiplying our applications or endpoints, it's important that we've thought security in at the core of this, and that's the importance of everything we do. If we don't have security built in at core or at the level of when we do the code applications, we're not capable of extending the spread and the scaling that we would need once the applications becomes really, really busy, right? And I think that's the importance here. Yeah. And figuring out how do we embed security as code.
Okay. Really interesting discussions, guys, and I want to thank all the panelists for sharing their thoughts and the advices that they have been given. So if the studio can pop up the next slide. Okay, so it's time for a break. So hopefully the presentations this morning have all inspired you. You use our 15 minutes break, and you can visit the virtual booth to explore the technologies and the services. You can have a chat with our experts from either Westcon or the vendors. They're waiting for you in the booth. You can look at the live videos. You can text. You can chat. You can request for a callback. Remember, we have the treasure hunt. Don't forget that, hidden in our booths. So more to find for you, and you can win these nice prizes of an iPhone 12 or a Galaxy S21. Alternatively, after you have grabbed a coffee, you can also test your speed and memory in our mini game during the break and win some prizes sponsored by Pulse Secure today. After the break, which is for CET time 12:35, GMT 11:35, the agenda will continue with the breakout sessions. So join our vendor partners to hear what they have to offer you for Zero Trust Access market in breakout room 1, or secure cloud and DevOps security market in breakout room 2. I really, really appreciate your attendance, and thank you all for listening to the presentations. Hector, the Black Hat, and then as well, hopefully also the panel discussions are very interesting for you. So enjoy the break, and we see you all soon after the break in the breakout rooms. Have a great event. Thanks for joining.
Hi, and welcome back. Thank you. Hi, and welcome back to day 2 of Imagine EMEA 2021. I'm Paul Cunningham, Chief Marketing Officer, and it's my great pleasure to close today's session with you. I hope very much that you took the opportunity during the break to interact with our many experts in today's event, whether they be from our vendor partner sponsors or my colleagues at Westcon. In preparing for today's session, the team that was planning Imagine asked me to consider the ways in which Westcon is innovating itself and thereby enabling innovation for our partners. And we heard a lot from Stuart Wilson from IDC yesterday about the characteristics of the partner of the future and the kinds of activities and business models they should be considering in planning that future. Stuart's other key point is that the IT channel that we all participate in as a business model is definitely transforming. Technology consumption and procurement models are fundamentally changing as we move into this increasingly digital and software-driven world that is creating so many of these new opportunities and challenges. As a business, we ourselves are seeing a trajectory in our business model that indicates that probably in the next 2 years, well over 50% and probably north of 60% of our revenue will be software-based. And that has significant implications for us as a business and for you as our partners. We're definitely changing with you. Westcon has been around for over 30 years, and we've built a huge amount of experience and pedigree as a value-added distributor in the marketplaces that we've chosen to work in. And we're now building on that experience and our expertise to help our partners and our vendors to adapt to this new digital world. Our commitment, which I'm hoping to give you some indications of over the next half hour or so, is that our investment in supporting services, technology, not just our vendor relationships, and insights based on real-world data that we are in a position to collect and collate and promote as a distributor can help you, our partners, plan, engage, and grow very effectively and profitably in this new emerging digital landscape. As Chief Marketing Officer, one of the things that I care very much about is listening to what our partners are telling us. And we spent a fair bit of time in the late summer and autumn of 2020 conducting some intensive research into partner sentiment, attitudes, and behavior around this emerging area of digital transformation. We interviewed around 40 strategic partners globally. And by strategic, I don't just mean they were large in size. These were partners that demonstrated characteristics of high growth potential, interest in emerging technology areas, interest in evolving business models that we felt were worthy of greater attention. At the same time, we conducted a digital listening exercise where we scanned various elements of the web and social media to identify conversations that were taking place around the core topics of digital transformation in the channel. And we ended up working with about 3 million individual elements of those conversations that we worked with a third-party agency to analyze and identify key trends and requirements in the channel. I'm not going to present the details of that research to you today, but I think we can effectively paraphrase the key headlines that came out of that research in the 3 areas shown here. The first thing we heard is that our partners want to be absolutely confident in the technology and the vendor relationships that you are effectively basing your future business on. You need assistance in understanding the availability and the impact of those technologies and help from us in curating them into effective solutions. The second key point was that our partners were telling us that they wanted to assure that those solutions, once identified and deployed by the customer, are absolutely successful and they can provide sustained business benefits for that end user customer that the partner can then build on to build a long-term, effective and deep relationship with that customer. The third key area that we identified was that the understanding of those future opportunities needs to be based on real-world data and insight, not just instinct or guesswork or the market hype that we see all too often around emerging technologies. So what I'd like to do is to spend some time drilling down on each of these areas and explaining how Westcon is innovating to try and address these key partner requirements. It falls into what I call 3 areas of innovation enablement or innovation enablers, and I'll deal with each one of these in turn. The first is what I would term a relevant and a trusted ecosystem, which is supported by a community of experts, a very important enabler of innovation, not just from a technology viewpoint, but also a business model perspective as well. The second area is a focus on customer success. And the reason for having that focus is that it should enable us to maximize value at different stages of the solution lifecycle and link that innovation and its pursuit to the targeted business outcomes of our customers. And the third area, as I mentioned just now, is insights that identify real opportunity, not just speculation, but real opportunity with buyers who are at a point in their own development when they're ready to innovate, either in deploying new technology or expanding their use of existing solutions. So let's take a look at these 3 enablers or building blocks of what I term future-ready distribution. The first, as I said, is this idea of an ecosystem. And of course, we want to work with market leaders, whether that be in terms of scale or recognition of technology leadership. By combining that market leadership and a focus on innovation, we believe we can accelerate customers' adoption of the relevant technology and enable new business models for our partners at the same time. The key word here is relevance. It has to be driven by the targeted business outcome. And we heard in the panel debate earlier with our esteemed guest speakers how important it was to link that technology investment and innovation to the business outcome. But the ecosystem alone isn't necessarily enough. The ecosystem kind of exists independently of things that we decide to do. Westcon does not own these categories of technology. These exist independently of us and our customer relationships, whether it's zero trust, IoT, next-gen SOC, second DevOps, working in the cloud. That ecosystem is there to be worked with. The key to creating value from that ecosystem, from my point of view, is to think about communities. In the same way that an ecosystem supports the development of any community or any population, those communities tend to form on the basis of mutual interest, potential for growth, potential for investment, potential for trade, each with each other and with wider communities as well. So the ecosystem is simply the environment in which we can succeed. It is absolutely essential that we build communities of expertise between ourselves, with our peers, as René and the panel were exploring earlier, this idea of partner-to-partner collaboration. But the notion of the community and the way that we construct it is absolutely essential and fundamental to our success with this ecosystem. And by engaging today in the Imagine event, you're taking a step forward to working as part of the wider Westcon community in pursuit of those objectives. The second element of future-ready distribution that we believe is an innovation enabler is solutions lifecycle. This IT supply ecosystem is increasingly recognizing the importance of solutions lifecycle management. And we're innovating to ensure that we align very well with both our vendor partners and our customers to address this requirement and sustain that relevance that I was talking about. René Klein explained earlier how the circuit concept is helping us to address this solutions lifecycle management requirement with our partners. Now, circuit isn't a product. It's not something you're going to buy and install from us. but it's a new way of thinking and working in relation to customers and their own development across the solutions lifecycle. We recognize that not every customer moves at the same pace. Each will have their own particular roadmap, their own idea of expansion and development, or the use of a technology over time. What Circuit allows us to do as a way of working in our sales organization is to enable and equip you, our partners, with an understanding of where particular customers are on that life cycle and what is the appropriate method to engage with them to maximize the value of opportunity at each stage of that life cycle. If we get this right, the customer gets absolutely the maximum value from the solution, which means we should in turn see decreased customer churn, a stronger rate of renewals, and increased upsell and expansion opportunities across that life cycle. It's about recognizing that the solutions life cycle, the sales life cycle, is not an even, homogeneous pattern of activity. We have to be having the right data at the right time in the solutions life cycle to address the particular needs of that customer to move on and expand their use and the capabilities with that technology. You may already have been working with us in this way, and if so, I'm hoping you've seen great results from working in this particular methodology, but it's something we're very keen to expand and are working on a number of opportunities with our vendors at this point in time. So you will be hearing more about this as you engage with Westcon, particularly in cybersecurity. The next enabler of innovation is what I've termed insights, which of course are based on data. And Westcon is striving at all times to be a data-driven business. Our insights on market opportunities allow you to target high probability prospects and cut through some of the market noise that we talked about earlier, and hopefully accelerate returns from your marketing and sales investments. As Westcon, we're in a very privileged position in as much as we are able to gather a significant amount of operational, third-party, market trend data, as well as the transactional information that we see coming through our day-to-day business with our partners. And what we are attempting to do is to combine all of those disparate threads of data into a meaningful set of insights and analysis that informs the way that we plan our joint business models with our partners. One of the ways that we're delivering on this is through a program which we call Intelligent Demand. You could argue, I suppose, that Circuit itself, as I described just now, is an example of a data-driven program. What Intelligent Demand does, however, is to take that same core data that we're building and to apply it to demand generation. We effectively combine our operational data, our transactional data, with very well recognized third-party data sources around market sizing, market trends, available spend, budget planning in large organizations, and so on. And we underpin that with very targeted digital marketing support to help you unlock opportunity at every stage of that solutions lifecycle that I mentioned just now. So our team of data scientists and our technology experts are consulting the data in collaboration with you, our partners, to understand your particular business requirements and build effectively a map and a plan to use that data to secure new business opportunities on your behalf. We use advanced analytics, combining a whole range of data types and different models, along with that third-party market intelligence to build a baseline we can work from. And we then work alongside our own marketing teams and with yours to try and develop innovative campaign ideas that will build on that business understanding, that data-based understanding, and allow us to really execute extremely effectively in a very targeted way against those customers and to effectively build an incremental business pipeline on your behalf. Let's think about the comparison of intelligent demand as a technique with the way in which we've traditionally gone after marketplaces. In the traditional approach, even when we had reasonably good data, there was a fairly standard way of doing these things. And we would segment the market based on perhaps a geography, a country, possibly a vertical market sector or a customer size, and a size of organization, either in terms of heads or perhaps a revenue base. And that might tell us that, in the UK, in the healthcare sector, for organizations that have 1 billion sterling revenue plus, is what we would describe as a target market segment. And that might yield us, in a typical exercise, maybe 1.5 to 2,000 potential contacts or organizations that we'd go and target out of an initial base of, say, 1 million companies. That very limited way of thinking about the characteristics or the segmentation of that target market only gets us part way to the buyer. And as I've implied through the use of the icon in the top part of this chart, it's about the equivalent of going into the village square with a megaphone and just shouting. It only gets us part way to the buyer. If we think about applying the principles of intelligent demand to the same problem, we can take that baseline analysis and overlay it with much more advanced analytics, looking at technographic information. And by technographic, we mean the installed technology base within those customers. We can look at firmographic information with much more detail than just how big are they. We can look at their characteristics as a business down to a very fine level of detail around their vertical market alignment, the geographical distribution, and also mapping that to their technographic information to understand what the map of technology investment potential looks like in that customer. And we can apply other algorithms as part of this analysis to work out what the likelihood is that certain customers may choose to buy or not buy at a point in time. So getting beyond that only partial understanding of the buyer means that we have to ask questions like, are they customers of another vendor that characterizes a potential opportunity for us, because we know there's a strong affinity between those technologies? And they may also be running a legacy product, A or B, that again indicates that they would be interested in this particular solution. In relation to that legacy product, do they have renewals upcoming that may act as a factor in them deciding to invest in a different way around that technology area? And finally, what do we know about their spending plans? And we have third-party data sources that will help to inform us what are not just their generic plans, but to some level of detail, what is their likely expenditure and budget on a particular technology sector in this year? All of that combined gives us the ability to deliver prospects to our partners who have a higher propensity to buy. This model also works at different levels of scale. It can be used on a one-to-one basis to penetrate an existing account that is either a must-win or a must-defend, where we have a strong degree of executive relationship, and we can seek out that sponsorship to have an informed conversation about these technologies. It works in a kind of one-to-few model, where there might be a small cluster of accounts that have similar characteristics that we believe we can establish a strong footprint that can be defended within as part of our market development. And it also works in the one-to-many model, where we may have a few hundred accounts we want to target as part of our business development process with digital marketing, and use that as a kind of funnel or a gateway into these one-to-few and one-to-one account relationships. So by understanding at a fairly fine level of detail, what is the data telling us? Where is the opportunity? Not going into the village square with a megaphone and shouting, but taking a targeted, dedicated approach to account development using the right data. We believe that this can be a revolutionary way to get to buyers and to expand our marketplace. My closing point is, I guess, a question to you, the audience, is, are you ready for your specific future? Whatever your business model, whether you're a managed security service provider, a born-in-the-cloud reseller, a solution integrator, or perhaps what I might call a traditional value-added reseller, you will arrive with a particular set of experiences and expectations and goals that we will take our time to understand and adapt our services and our investments to match with your requirements. Whatever your business model, we will work with you very intently to discover your specific potential and take your experience, your skills, and your customers to ensure that we innovate with a purpose. Again, a comment that was made in the panel debate earlier is that innovation has to be tied to business outcomes. So that has to be the purpose of innovation. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen for no reason at all. And we believe that by doing that and by taking the time to understand your particular approach, we can help you create and sustain new recurring revenue streams in this emerging market. And as you know, that's been a key theme of the Imagine event over the last couple of days. Our purpose as Westcon, when we think about innovation, is to build successful partnerships in this world of new opportunities. And I hope in the last 20 minutes or so, I've had the opportunity to persuade you and inform you that the innovations that we're undertaking, particularly in those three key areas, suit us very well to act as that partner in helping you build this new business. That concludes my presentation, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you very much for your participation today. And as well as that of our sponsors, our panelists, and our speakers, I hope you found the agenda to be informative, entertaining at times, and it's helped to inspire your thinking about how you can take your business model forward with Westcon. Of course, we come back tomorrow for day 2, where we'll be hearing in our morning keynote presentation from the award-winning journalist, author, and broadcaster, Misha Glenny, who will be sharing his insight and experience of some of the darker parts of that cybersecurity ecosystem that I mentioned earlier. In addition, you can still pursue the shields for the treasure hunt, as well as joining the sessions on Zero Trust Access, Secure Cloud, and DevOps security. I'll also ask you to spare a few moments, if you can, at the end of the session today to conclude and participate in the survey that will appear in the chat box to the right-hand side of your screen. We really appreciate the feedback you can offer us on this event. It helps us greatly in terms of planning our future events and making sure that they meet the requirements of our partners. And it's a chance for you to give us additional feedback on what you liked and maybe didn't like so much about what we've offered today. With that, I'd like to say thank you again for attending. We hope to see you again tomorrow and working with you in the near future. Thank you.